But first, today, here's some late-breaking expat news that you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, I get plenty of emails from people asking me how to transfer their money around if they're going to get the hell out of the first world or the States in general. I mean, let's face it, it's nobody's business but your own how much money or capital you have and where you might have it or have it stashed, and how and whom you wish to communicate with or do business or banking with. That said, I've always recommended Bitcoin as a means to transfer your money around. Not necessarily Bitcoin as an investment, but as a means of doing transactions and moving money around with the most amount of privacy that you can obtain in today's world anyway. Which leads me to this email that just came a day or two ago that speaks for itself. This one also comes from a new friend of mine who attended one of my Expat Wisdom seminars. He says, "Hey Johnny, thought everyone would be interested to hear this story. I recently got in the mail 4 letters from BBVA Compass Bank, the bank I've been doing my personal and business banking for 10 years. The 4 letters referenced 4 different checking accounts, business and personal, and explained that they were closing my accounts in 30 days. There was no explanation to the letter, so thinking it was a mistake, I walked into the local branch. I talked to the manager, and this is up in the States, of course, who has become somewhat of a personal friend over the years. And he explained that my accounts are being closed because I tried to wire money to buy Bitcoin. He explained that Bitcoin was an unregulated activity and that the federal government could fine them for such transactions. Uncle Sam, in fact, just fined J.P. Morgan Chase $2.5 billion for similar Bitcoin transactions. Anyway, hope all is well in paradise. Looking for a new bank now. Your buddy, well, I won't mention his name because that wouldn't be cool. So anyway, that's news to me. And I hope all you guys and gals up north aren't having problems like that, but I'm sure soon enough you will. So, with that real-life case of Bitcoin discrimination up in the States, don't you think it's about time to get your assets down here as quick as you can? When push comes to shove, how much more can you take? If that's not a shove or a good swift kick in the ass, I don't know what is. Now, related to that, let me now read you something that actually blew me away when I first looked at it. It's a link to an article that some Bitcoin holding friends of mine have sent me that came from a site called reddit.com. Pay attention to this now, because it's bound to change your paradigm and the way you feel about your government and Bitcoin. This letter's entitled, Game Changer, Bitcoin Research at the Federal Reserve and How I Lost My Job There. And I'll try to paraphrase this a little bit because it's long and a bit rambling. Now, I've passed this around to some of my friends in the financial data world, and nearly all of them seem to think that there's some information here being held back, or this guy who wrote this letter would certainly end up in jail, missing, or vacationing in Guantanamo. So basically the small consensus of financial people that I've spoken to about this seem to feel it's incomplete but not bogus. Though you're sure to have your own opinion and you can be the judge of that. Now remember, though I might not have told you this before, I have some friends who were in on the very beginnings of this cryptocurrency and Bitcoin thing. So what I know about Bitcoin is not from internet smoke that blows out of the south end of the elementary canal, if you know what I mean. That said, I will proceed to read this. So here goes. My background. I'm a trained economist with a BS in computer science, an MS in operations research, and a PhD in econometrics. I interned at the New York Fed during my degree. After that, I worked at macro trading hedge funds and now work at a major southeastern federal branch doing econometrics and related modeling. Now, I've had a long-running interest in Bitcoin and was actually one of the very first people to publish a working paper on FPGA-based Bitcoin mining at a Georgia university focused on technology. I know Bitcoin technology and economics on a theoretical and applied level. I'm not motivated by money. Just notice my move from hedge funds to the Fed. I'm actually an applied academic with an incessant drive for research. Now, my job. I function as a briefing researcher at the Federal Reserve. My primary research interests are the statistical modeling of developing currencies and the integration of those models into our massively parallel simulations for policy projections and forecasts. In layman's terms, I do the lower-level mathematical statistical research and then brief the senior management who, get this, are the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors at our regular meetings. In the beginning of May 2014, my team and I were assigned to an exploratory project. Typically, summer is the off-season and most of our projects are time fillers that result in a few papers and presentations and are then archived and never heard of again. This project, however, was different. We were given a direct research assignment from the Board of Governors of the Fed a few hours after the conclusion of their May 29th closed meeting. Now, this was our assignment. We, and as far as I know, several other research teams across the Federal Reserve System were tasked with creating a Bitcoin report. I assigned my team to run the typical econometrics simulations and forecasts that we do for developing currencies. Thinking this was summer doldrum busy work, we were diligent on our calculations and modeling, but definitely did not go out of our way to provide extra insight. At the end of June, I presented the report to my Fed governor and was met with strong disapproval and a sense of utmost urgency. Long story short, I almost lost my job for not taking this project as seriously as I should have. So the Fed Board of Governors renewed the project and gave us explicit research directions along with weekly addendums. Now, here's the down and dirty. And he writes this part in heavy, bold lettering. He says, "We were directed to upgrade our modeling of Bitcoin from a developing currency to a major currency. In addition to all of the common modeling and forecasting that kind of task entails. We were instructed to do full simulations of money flow, interest rate, multi-currency derivative baskets, risk metrics, and their effects on global macro monetary policy and trade agreements." Now, what we found was shocking. Even with a mediocre Bitcoin adoption rate and a variable growth rate, Bitcoin severely disrupts how we model, forecast, and ultimately understand currency interactions to make our monetary policy decisions. This is a huge technological, monetary, and policy disruption, which leaves the Fed, the U.S. government, and other entities with much less control. Now, our best case scenarios are modeled upon current Bitcoin adoption rates, which have simulated a tipping point for the year 2026 and the worst case, 2021. This time frame projects that the Fed, via the dollar, will lose its dominant global monetary policy maker status. Then, at that point, instead of the dollar, everything will be superseded by Bitcoin. Now, know this. I presented this updated report to the Fed along with all of our modeling work and simulation outputs, which were statistically and independently verified to the Board of Governors. The board was highly alarmed and interrogated me and my fellow researchers in a 3-day session, trying to understand every point of our research. It must be remembered that, unlike politicians, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors is a very well-educated and empirical group with an ability to conceptually grasp complicated research like this. So, in the end, what was the outcome? 3 weeks after the report, my research team was disbanded. I was moved to a tiny regional Federal Reserve branch and given virtually no research resources. Similar fates came to my own team members, and most of us are actively trying to pursue opportunities outside of the system. In other words, we're all looking for jobs. Now, note that while classified non-disclosure agreements bind me and my group in many ways, I personally will try to go back into the trading industry with a keen eye on Bitcoin as my primary research interest. And then he finishes off by saying, "It's clear to me that Bitcoin has fundamentally changed the spectrum of how we view and model economics. The central banks are afraid, the governments are afraid, and they would rather bury the truth by firing their own dedicated researchers and archiving the reports than embrace change to build a sustainable economic future." Okay, that too was just for your information, and here's more. Now, of course, cyber currencies like Bitcoin do tie in quite a bit to our discussions about Latin America. Because let's face it, paper fiat money is on its way out and cyber currencies on their way in. That said, what do you make of this? The following was sent to me by another one of our Expat Wisdom Seminar friends, John, focusing again on Ecuador. In a previous show, I mentioned that Ecuador has one of the 10 crappiest bond ratings and debt ratios of all 200 or so countries in the world. If you remember, I mentioned it was sitting right in the same financial toilet bowl as Haiti, Argentina, and Venezuela. Oh yeah, and little Belize. Anyway, this is an August 29th AP report from Quito, Ecuador. So, paraphrasing, Ecuador is planning to create the world's first government-issued digital currency, which some analysts believe could be a first step toward abandoning the country's existing currency, the U.S. dollar, which the Ecuadorian government can't control. This new Ecuadorian virtual currency, which central bank officials say they expect will start circulating in December, does not yet have a name, and officials would not disclose the technical details, though they said it would be not like Bitcoin. The amount of the new currency created would depend on demand. Now, if you recall, one of Bitcoin's strongest points is that it has a limit to the amount that can be created, something like 22 million Bitcoins, and that's it. So the article goes on to say, users initially will be able to make and receive payments at a minimal cost using their cell phones, such as mobile payment schemes are now already popular in African nations, including Kenya and Tanzania. Wait a minute. Do you get this? You got a third world country like Ecuador copying a financial scheme used by a fourth world, indescribably corrupt, failed African state. If I didn't see this come out of AP, I would have thought it was a script for a Dumb and Dumber movie. And there's more. They're going to copy Obamaland, Kenya? Well, Obama, you still have time to write your own Dumb and Dumber script. Oh, I forgot. For the last 6 years, that's what you've been doing.